Okay, we're going to get into the last bit of our genetics section here, and we're going to start with a concept called polygenic inheritance. Most genes in the human body, most traits in the human body that you see, physical phenotypes, are actually going to be polygenic. We don't have very many monogenic traits. Now, what does that mean? Well, mono means one and poly means many, right? So most of our traits are actually determined by multiple genes. Hair color, eye color, skin color. It's not one gene which causes it, and that's why there's not only two options for skin color, two options for hair color, two options for eye color. If you look at this diagram down here, this chart, you can see there's two examples. The one here on the left refers to a monogenic trait, and that would be something called widow's peak. There's two options for your hairline. Your hairline can be flat, straight across, or it can have something called a widow's peak, which means that some of those follicles dip down. So if you were to go look in a mirror right now and pull your hair back and look at your hairline, chances are you have a little bit of hair that dips down below. It's, in some people it's more obvious, in some people it's more subtle, but either you have it or you don't. There's no halfway with that. And we have a handful of traits that are like that. But most of our traits are going to be this variety, where there's many genes that code for it. So you're going to have varying degrees of skin color. So it can go from light to dark. For example, my skin tone is very light, and that has to do with what part of the world genetically your heritage is from. People that are from parts of the world that are closer to the equator tend to have darker skin because there's more sun, and having more melanin helps prevent your cells from being damaged by the sun's UV rays. And then people that are from areas of the world that are not near the equator, their cells are going to have less melanin because it takes energy to make melanin and it costs resources. So it was more beneficial for people that are from that part of the world to not produce that melanin. So this is just an example. Just make sure you're familiar with the idea that polygenic means that more than one gene codes for it, and there's going to be a varying degree of results, like height, for example. If I lined up everybody in class, it's not like there's going to be two groups, tall and short. There's going to be a very wide range of height. So that's polygenic inheritance. Okay, last bit here. We're going to talk about something called sex-linked traits or X-linked traits. We have 23 pairs of chromosomes in our cells, right? So 23 pairs, and then there's only 23 chromosomes in a haploid cell in our sex chromosomes. And 22 of those are called autosomes, and those are the same in males and females. And that last pair of chromosomes, if you remember from the last section we talked about, that last pair of chromosomes are called the sex chromosomes or the X chromosomes. And they're the only ones in humans that are non-homologous, meaning they're not the same. So if I were to draw out your chromosomes, I would have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way to 23. The first 22 would be identical in males and females. 1 through 22 are the same. That 23rd pair, though, is the only pair that's going to be different. And in males, they're going to have an X and a Y. And in females, they're going to have two X's. So how does this relate to the genetics problems? Well, if you look here, you can see males and females, when they give their gene to their offspring, males can only give one X or one Y, where females can only give an X. So if you take a look here, what are the chances of getting a boy versus a girl? Well, it's going to be a 50% chance, and here's why. If you take a look here, the father can only donate an X or a Y, and the mother can only donate an X. So when we fill in the Punnett square here, what you can see is two of these boxes have two X's, and two of these boxes have an X and a Y. So even though a mother only doesn't have a Y at all, she can't pass on and why the father's really the one that determines if it's a boy or a girl. So you may have heard the story about King Henry, who cut off the head of his wife when she had a son, or when she didn't have a son, I should say, because at that time period, a king needed to have a son. He kept beheading his wives and blaming his wives for having daughters, when in reality, he was the one that was, not donating the Y chromosome. Now, obviously, he couldn't control that. That was just random chance. But if you want to get down to it, he was really the one to blame, because the woman, his wife, didn't even have a Y to donate. So there's no way that that woman could have had, given a Y and produced a son. But again, just to make the point here, it's a 2-to-2 ratio, or a 50% chance. So how does this relate to genetics? Well, there are some traits that are linked to the X chromosome, that 23rd pair X. And actually, most genetic disorders are X-linked, and that's something that's pretty interesting. but most are expressed in males. So males are the ones that get these X-linked traits more than females. Perfect example would be baldness. You don't see very many bald women walking around. You see a lot more bald men. And it's because of this idea of an X-linked trait. So how do we do these problems? How does this work? Let's take a look at an example here. So I know this is kind of crude. This is my terrible drawing, but I just wanted to make a point here. When you're looking at a X-linked trait, this is why it's different. In males, males have an X and a Y, and in females, they have two X's. So let's say color blindness, right? So color blindness is actually an X-linked trait. Men are more commonly affected by color blindness than women are affected by color blindness, which is odd, right? So why is that the case? Well, here's why. Men only have one X. Women have two X's. These traits are only carried on the X chromosome. They're not carried on the Y chromosome. So men only need to have one of the dominant alleles in order to have the trait. So let me explain that a little bit better. So let's say in color blindness, normal vision, big N, is dominant to color blindness, little n. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to have our X's, and then we're going to have this little n is going to be as a superscript, that N is going to be attached to it, similar to how we did blood type. If you remember in blood typing, we had an I, and either it had an A or a B attached. This is very similar. So let's start with women. So for women, they have two X's. So they can have either a big N or a little n attached to it. So there's three options for genotypes with women. They can have big N, they can have big N, or they can have little n, little n. Well, if you remember when we talked about this before, big N, little n is the same as little n, big N, right? So if I take a look at this, what I find is these two genotypes are going to have normal hair, right? I'm sorry, normal eye color. So they're going to be normal. And this one is going to have color blindness. So this is going to be blind. I'm just going to use a B for blind. So of 4 possible chances, because remember, this is big N, little n, big N, there's a 75% chance that that woman is going to be normal. In order for her to have the disorder, she has to have 2 little n's. So that's only a 25% chance. Now let's look at the man. Men don't have 2 X's. They only have 1 X. And what that means is they only need to have 1 N, big N, to have the disorder. So either they have a big N or they have a little n. So if I look here, this would be normal. This person has normal vision, and this person has color blindness, right? This person is blind. Well, if you look at this example, it's a 50-50% chance. So men are more commonly going to be affected by it than women. And women are going to be something called a carrier. So this one right here, this big N, little n, that is going to be what we call a carrier. So I am bald. I don't know if you know this about me. You've seen me before, right? I have male pattern baldness. And I'd like to get mad at my dad for it because he's also bald. But in reality, he didn't have anything to do with it because my dad was bald. So he was little ny. But I'm a boy, a guy, so that means my dad had to donate the Y chromosome. That's what he gave to me. He didn't give the little n. My mom is the one who did it. She's what we call a carrier because even though she's not bald, she has a little n on her genes that, she has that possibility to pass it on. So that is the difference. That is why males are oftentimes going to be more commonly affected by these traits than females. So females usually act as carriers. They carry the recessive trait on one of their chromosomes, but they don't have that actual trait. So if you look here, that just shows that idea. So females act as carriers, meaning they don't actually have the trait, but they can pass it on. So, gentlemen, if you're concerned about going bald, you don't actually want to look at your dad in this scenario. You want to look at your mom, and more specifically, you want to look at your mom's dad. Because if your mom's dad was bald, that means he passed on his little n to to your mom, and then she could pass it on to you. So that's a little bit of reality for you. Okay, let's try a problem out. Let's see how this goes. And then we're actually going to try a couple out, and then we'll take it from there. And hopefully we'll see if you guys have any questions if you want to email me. So let's try this problem out. Normal colored vision, big N, is dominant to color blindness, little n. Color blindness is an X-linked trait. So as soon as you see the words X-linked or sex-linked trait, you need to think XX XY. This is no longer going to be the same in males and females. So males are colorblind more than women, and the gene is only found on the X chromosome. What is the chance that a man with normal vision and a woman who is a carrier will have a child that is colorblind? Well, one trick to these problems is as soon as you see the words X-linked or sex-linked, you want to draw an XX and an XY because it matters. Males and females are different. Male is going to be XY, female is going to be XX. So it says, what is the chance that a man with normal vision? So we know that this is the male, he's normal. So he's going to have a big N on the X and nothing on the Y because this trait isn't carried on the Y chromosome. It's only carried on the X. And then we have a woman who is a carrier. So if she's a carrier, she's going to be big N, little n. Now, if it said that she was homozygous dominant, she would be big N, but she's not. So let's fill in our Punnett square. So we have our big N, little n for the mother. We have the big N, Y for the father. So let's fill in our Punnett square. So this box is going to be big N. This box is going to be big N, little n. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, Mr. Adolph, why do I need to use these X's? Why can't I just use, N's? Because it's an N and an N, right? The reason why is right here. Males and females are different. And if I didn't have Y's in there, if I didn't have these X's and Y's, I wouldn't be able to find the problem. So I fill in my Punnett square. And I want to know, what is the chance of a man with normal vision and a woman who is a carrier having a child that is colorblind? Well, if I take a look here, this is a woman, but she's not colorblind. This is a woman, she's not colorblind because she's a carrier, right? She can pass it on to her kid, but she's not colorblind. And then down here, we have a male that is normal. And then finally, we have a male that is colorblind. So what's the chance of them having a child that is colorblind? That would be a 25% chance. Okay, and that's the answer to that question. So let's try one more, and then we'll be done for this one. Baldness is an X-linked trait where men are more commonly affected than females. What are the chances that a bald man and a woman that has normal hair will have a bald son? The woman had a father who was bald and a mother with normal hair. So it's a lot of information, right? So the first thing we want to think of is, remember, we want to do XX, XY. Because as soon as we see X-linked trait, we want that there. So it says we have a male who is bald, a bald man. So in this one, he's going to be little n, and then again, nothing on the Y, because the Y doesn't carry this trait. It's only carried on the X chromosome. A woman here who has normal hair, now she could be big N, or she can be big N, little n. We don't know. But we do know because the next part of this question gives you some important information. It says the woman had a father who was bald and a mother with normal hair. Well, if she had a father who was bald, the father had to donate a little n because the father had to be X little n Y, so we know that this has to be the mother's genotype. If I didn't give you this sentence here, if it didn't give you this sentence, you would not be able to figure out this problem. But I gave it to you, so let's see what the answer is. So the mother's big N, little m, and the father is little n Y. So I'm going to fill in my Punnett square. By plugging in all these nifty little X's and Y's. And the question is asking, what are the chances of them having a bald son? So if I take a look here, of the 4 possibilities, I have a normal female, a bald female, a normal male, and a bald male. So the answer to this question is not 50% because I asked what is the chance of having a bald son. So the answer would be 25%. Now, if I ask what are the chances of having a bald child, male or female, it would be 50%. But the answer for this one is 25%. And that's it. Thank you very much.